After David left for his office downtown, I sat at our kitchen island with my laptop, a cup of coffee growing cold beside me as I immersed myself in the details of Evergreen Shores Resort. Though I owned the property, I had been a largely absent owner, trusting the management company to handle operations while I received quarterly reports and dividends. Now, I pulled up every document, every report, every piece of information about the resort I could access. I learned that the Turner family had indeed been regular guests for the past 4 years, always the same week in June, always the same lakeside suites. Patricia had even left specific instructions for how the rooms should be prepared, what amenities should be provided, which staff members she preferred. I scrolled through photos of the property, the elegant main building with its sweeping views of Lake Michigan, the private cabins nestled among towering pines, the expansive gardens that bloomed gloriously in summer. It was beautiful, exclusive, and exactly the kind of place the Turners would consider their natural habitat. By noon, I had formulated the beginning of a plan. I emailed Marcus, the resort manager, requesting a video call. When his face appeared, on my screen an hour later, his expression was curious but professional. "Emma, this is unexpected. Is everything all right with the property?" "Everything's fine, Marcus," I assured him. "But I'll be taking a more active role in the resort for a bit, starting with a stay in June." I outlined what I needed: my presence at the resort to be kept strictly confidential until my arrival, access to all information about the Turner family's upcoming stay, and a suite prepared for me that would allow maximum impact when the time came. Marcus listened, his professional demeanor slipping only slightly as he began to understand the unusual nature of my requests. "May I ask what this is about?" he finally ventured. I considered how much to reveal. Marcus had been managing the resort impeccably for years. He deserved some explanation. "The Turner family," I said carefully, "are my in-laws. They've excluded me from their gathering while inviting my husband, who plans to lie about his whereabouts. I simply want to make an appearance." Understanding dawned on Marcus's face, followed by something that might have been admiration. "I see. Well, Mrs. Fletcher, as the owner, you certainly have every right to visit your property whenever you wish. I'll make all the necessary arrangements with the utmost discretion." After our call ended, I sat back, a strange sense of calm settling over me. For years, I had tried to win the approval of Patricia and William Turner. I had endured their thinly veiled insults, their dismissals, their constant insinuations that David had married beneath him. I had smiled through holiday dinners where they reminisced about family events to which I hadn't been invited. I had watched David's slow capitulation to his mother's wishes, his gradual retreat from defending me, his increasing willingness to spend time with his family without me. No more. The time for seeking acceptance was over. Now I would simply claim what was mine: my dignity, my self-respect, and yes, my rightful place at Evergreen Shores Resort. The weeks that followed required careful navigation. I maintained my normal routine with David, never letting on that I knew about the upcoming vacation. I watched as he invented increasingly elaborate details about his fictional Seattle conference, even going so far as to leave brochures for the event on our coffee table, props in his performance of deceit. Meanwhile, I prepared for my own trip. I selected a wardrobe of elegant, confident pieces that would make a statement, clothes that said I belonged in the rarefied world of Evergreen Shores as surely as any Turner. I arranged for a week off work, telling my colleagues I was surprising David with an anniversary trip. As June approached, I found myself strangely energized. The hurt of betrayal remained, but it was overshadowed by a growing sense of anticipation. For once, I would be the one in control of the narrative. I would be the one with the power to reveal or conceal, to surprise or withdraw. 2 days before David was set to leave for his conference, I found him in our bedroom, surreptitiously, packing a suitcase with casual resort wear, clothes entirely unsuitable for the business event he had described to me. I stood in the doorway, watching as he carefully tucked away swimming trunks and boat shoes before quietly retreating downstairs. That night at dinner, he enthusiastically described the sessions he was most looking forward to at the fictional conference, his eyes never quite meeting mine. The morning of his departure arrived bright and clear. I kissed him goodbye at our front door, playing the role of the supportive wife sending her husband off to advance his career. "I'll miss you," he said, holding me close for a moment. "I'll call every night." "Have a wonderful time," I replied, the double meaning of my words lost on him. "I hope it's illuminating." As his car disappeared down our tree-lined street, I closed the door and leaned against it, my heart racing with a mixture of anger and anticipation. The game was in motion now. In exactly 24 hours, I would arrive at Evergreen Shores Resort, not as Emma Fletcher, the unwanted daughter-in-law, but as Emma Fletcher, the owner and proprietor, ready to welcome the Turner family to my property. I spent my last day of preparation making final arrangements. I confirmed details with Marcus, who reported that the Turners had arrived that afternoon, with David expected the following day. I arranged for my luggage to be delivered discreetly to my suite, the owner's suite, typically reserved for my use, though I had never actually stayed there. It was positioned perfectly in the main building with a private entrance, yet with easy access to the common areas where the family would gather. That night, I slept surprisingly well, waking refreshed and ready. The drive to Lake Michigan took just under 2 hours, the landscape gradually transforming from suburban sprawl to the lush greenery of Michigan's shoreline. As Evergreen Shores came into view, its elegant facade nestled among towering pines, the blue expanse of Lake Michigan stretching beyond, I felt a surge of pride. This beautiful place was mine, created through my investment, my vision, my work. Marcus met me at a private entrance, his usual professional demeanor tinged with an unmistakable eagerness. "Mrs. Fletcher, welcome to Evergreen Shores," he said, as though I were visiting for the first time. "Everything is arranged as you requested." He escorted me to the owner's suite, a stunning space with panoramic views of the lake, explaining that the Turner family was currently gathered on the south deck for lunch. "They're scheduled to remain there until approximately 2 o'clock, he informed me, followed by boating at 3. "Your husband is expected to arrive within the hour." "Perfect," I said, surveying the elegant space that had been prepared for me. "Please have someone notify me when he checks in. And Marcus, thank you for your discretion." Left alone, I changed into a simple but striking blue dress, the color of Lake Michigan on a clear day, and took a moment to gather myself. The anger and hurt that had propelled me here were still present, but they had transformed into something more controlled, more purposeful. This wasn't about revenge, I realized. It was about truth, forcing into the light what had too long been hidden in shadow. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. "Mr. Turner has arrived and is being escorted to his suite. The family remains on the south deck." It was time. I made my way through the resort's elegant corridors, nodding to staff members who had been briefed on my presence. As I approached David's suite, I saw him just entering, his back to me as he chatted with the porter carrying his luggage. I waited until the porter had left before approaching, my heels clicking softly on the polished hardwood floor. "Welcome to Evergreen Shores, David." He froze, his keycard halfway to the door lock, then turned slowly, his face draining of color as he saw me standing there, calm and composed in the last place he expected to find me. "Emma?" His voice was barely a whisper. "What? How are you here?" Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. He began, then trailed off, unable to complete the thought. I turned to face him fully. Yes, David. All this time. The double meaning wasn't lost on him. I could see it in the way he flinched slightly. All this time I'd owned this resort, and all this time he'd been allowing his family to exclude me. Patricia recovered first, years of social training clicking into place. Her back straightened, and a brittle smile appeared on her face. "Well, this is quite the surprise," she said, her voice straining for lightness. "I suppose congratulations are in order. What a coincidence that we've been patronizing your business without knowing. Isn't it?" I agreed pleasantly. Almost as coincidental as my husband attending a family vacation I knew nothing about. The assembled Turners shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Jennifer, David's younger sister, had the grace to look embarrassed, while her husband suddenly became very interested in stirring his iced tea. Michael, the oldest Turner sibling, glanced between his mother and me, his expression calculating. "Perhaps we should continue this discussion more privately," William suggested, his eyes darting to nearby tables where other guests were beginning to notice the tension at our gathering. "I don't think that's necessary," I replied, my voice still, measured and calm. "After all, there's no secret anymore, is there? I'm here, you're here, and now we all know exactly where we stand." I turned to Marcus. "Would you mind having an additional place set for lunch? It seems I'll be joining my family after all." Marcus nodded and moved away to speak with the waitstaff. A heavy silence fell over the table, broken only when one of Michael's children called out from the nearby play area, oblivious to the adult drama unfolding. I took the empty chair between Jennifer and the edge of the table, the only available seat, significantly distant from David, who remained standing awkwardly beside his mother. For a moment, no one seemed to know what to say, the script for this scenario apparently missing from the Turner family playbook of proper behavior. A server appeared with a place setting, followed by another with a glass of champagne. "Compliments. Of the house, Mrs. Fletcher," she said with a knowing smile. I thanked her and raised my glass in a small toast toward the stunned family. "To unexpected reunions," I said, taking a sip. Patricia's mouth tightened into a thin line, but decades of social conditioning prevented her from causing a scene in public. Instead, she picked up her own glass with a hand that trembled slightly. "Indeed," she replied, not quite meeting my eyes. David finally moved to take the empty seat beside his father, his movements stiff and uncertain. I could feel his gaze on me, questioning, confused, maybe even a little afraid. Good. Let him wonder, let him worry. For too long, I had been the one feeling off balance in this relationship. "So, Emma," Michael's wife Lisa ventured clearly, attempting to break the tension. "How long have you owned Evergreen Shores?" I smiled at her effort. Lisa had always been the most welcoming of the Turner in-laws, perhaps recognizing a fellow outsider. "I purchased it 7 years ago before David and I met. It was my first major investment after inheriting from my grandmother." 7 years, David repeated, his voice hollow. "You've owned this place our entire relationship." I turned my attention to him. "Yes, just as you've had these family gatherings our entire marriage." Another uncomfortable silence descended. The server returned with my lunch, the chef's special, a delicate lake trout with seasonal vegetables. I thanked her and began to eat with deliberate calm, forcing everyone else to either continue their meal or sit awkwardly watching me. One by one, they resumed eating, though the earlier festive atmosphere had evaporated entirely. Conversation came in stilted bursts, comments about the weather, half-hearted compliments on the food, questions directed to the children that were too loud and too bright. Patricia kept shooting glances at William, a silent marital communication I recognized well. They were trying to decide how to handle this situation, how to regain control of their carefully orchestrated family narrative. But for once, they were completely out of their depth. As lunch wound down, I dabbed my napkin to my lips and stood. This has been lovely, but I should check in with the management team. I do have some resort business to attend to while I'm here." I smiled at the assembled family. "Please, continue enjoying your stay. Everything is already arranged." David half rose from his seat. "Emma, wait. We should talk." I regarded him steadily. "Yes, we should. But not right now." Without waiting for his response, I turned and walked away, feeling the weight of their stares on my back. It took everything in me to maintain my composure, to not let my shoulders sag with the emotional toll of the confrontation. Only when I was safely inside, out of their sight, did I allow myself a moment to lean against the wall, breathing deeply. Marcus approached, concern evident on his face. "Are you all right, Mrs. Fletcher?" I straightened, smoothing down my dress. "Perfectly fine, thank you. I'd like to see the quarterly reports now, if you don't mind. In my suite." He nodded, professional as ever, though I caught a glimmer of admiration in his eyes. Right away, as we walked through the elegant corridors of the resort, I felt a strange mix of emotions, the lingering anger and hurt, yes, but also a surprising sense of liberation. For years, I had been trying to fit myself into the Turner family mold, making myself smaller, less noticeable, desperate for their approval. Now, finally, I was standing firmly in my own power. Back in my suite, I spent the next few hours genuinely reviewing the resort's operations with Marcus. The business was running smoothly, the financials were strong, and guest satisfaction was at an all-time high. Despite my emotional turmoil, I felt a surge of pride in what we had built here. "You've done excellent work, Marcus," I told him as we concluded our meeting. "I should have been more involved before now." "You trusted us to do our jobs," he replied. "That's good leadership. But I have to admit, it's been refreshing having you here today." He hesitated, then added, "Especially given the circumstances." I smiled wryly. "You mean my dramatic revelation to my unsuspecting in-laws?" He returned the smile. "It was memorable." After Marcus left, I moved to the balcony of my suite, gazing out at the lake. The afternoon sun transformed the water into a sheet of hammered gold, sailboats dotting the horizon like tiny white birds. In the distance, I could see the resort's private dock where several small watercraft were moored. According to the day's schedule I had reviewed with Marcus, the Turner family would be taking a boat excursion soon. As if on cue, I spotted them making their way down the path to the dock, a perfect tableau of upper-class leisure, Patricia, in her designer sundress, William in his crisp linen shirt, the others following in their wake like a procession of courtiers. David was among them, his posture rigid, his movements lacking their usual easy confidence. I watched as they boarded the resort's largest vessel, a sleek cruiser piloted by one of our experienced staff members. They would spend the next few hours touring the coastline, stopping at a secluded cove for swimming. The same excursion they had taken every year, meticulously documented in the resort's records, which I had reviewed just that morning. Once they were out on the water, I returned inside and sank onto the plush sofa, suddenly exhausted. The adrenaline that had carried me through the confrontation was fading, leaving me drained. I kicked off my heels and closed my eyes, allowing myself this moment of vulnerability now that I was alone. My phone buzzed, a text from David. "We need to talk, please." I stared at the message, my thumb hovering over the screen. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to let him stew in uncertainty just as I had when I'd discovered his deception. But another part of me recognized that we had reached a crossroads. Whatever happened next would determine the course of our marriage, if there was still a marriage to save. Tonight, 8 p.m., my suite. I hit send before I could second-guess myself. His reply came almost instantly. "I'll be there." I set the phone aside and walked to the bathroom, splashing cold water on my face. In the mirror, my reflection looked different somehow, more defined, more present. The woman looking back at me wasn't the eager-to-please Emma who had tried so hard to win the Turners' approval. She was someone new, or perhaps someone who had been there all along, waiting for the right moment to emerge. The afternoon stretched before me, hours until my meeting with David. I decided to use the time to explore my resort properly, not as an abstraction on quarterly reports, but as the tangible result of my investment and vision. I changed into more casual clothes and set out, walking the perfectly manicured grounds, introducing myself to staff members, and observing the operations from a new perspective. Everywhere I went, I was greeted with respect and, from those who had witnessed the scene on the deck, a certain odd curiosity. By late afternoon, I had completed a full tour of the property and found myself drawn to the small private beach reserved for the owner's use. The sand was warm beneath my bare feet as I walked along the shoreline, the gentle waves lapping at my ankles. I breathed in the clean, pine-scented air, feeling more at peace than I had in weeks. The sound of an approaching boat engine broke my reverie. Looking up, I saw the Turner family's excursion returning, the sleek vessel cutting through the water toward the resort's dock. From my secluded spot, I could observe them without being seen. They disembarked one by one, their earlier carefree demeanor now subdued. Patricia and William walked ahead, heads bent together in intense conversation. Jennifer and her husband followed, maintaining a careful distance. Michael helped his children off the boat, his wife gathering their belongings. And finally, David, trailing behind them all, separate, his expression troubled. I watched as Patricia suddenly stopped, turning to address the group. Though I couldn't hear her words, her gestures made it clear she was issuing some sort of directive. The family huddled closer, all except David, who stood slightly apart, arms crossed defensively. After a moment, they dispersed, heading back toward the resort in smaller clusters. David remained on the dock, staring out at the lake, his silhouette, lonely against the darkening sky. For a moment, I felt a pang of sympathy. He looked lost, caught between loyalty to his family and whatever he felt for me. Then I remembered the invitation hidden in his desk, the elaborate lies about a Seattle conference, the years of allowing his family to exclude me, and my heart hardened again. I returned to my suite as twilight settled over the resort, the first stars appearing in the deepening blue of the sky. I ordered dinner from room service, a simple meal I barely tasted, and changed into a comfortable but elegant outfit for my meeting with David. This conversation would be difficult enough without the armor of formal clothing. At precisely 8 p.m., there was a soft knock at my door. Taking a deep breath, I opened it to find David standing there, his hair slightly disheveled as though he'd been running his hands through it in agitation. He'd changed, too, into casual clothes that seemed at odds with his tense expression. "Come in," I said, stepping aside. He entered hesitantly, his eyes sweeping the luxurious suite before settling on me. "This is quite a place you have here," he remarked, an awkward attempt at breaking the ice. "It is," I agreed, closing the door. "Would you like something to drink?" "No. Yes, I don't know." He paced to the window, then back again. "Emma, what is going on? Why didn't you ever tell me about this place?" I leaned against the arm of the sofa, watching him struggle. "Why didn't you ever tell me about these family vacations? Why did you lie about where you were going next week?" He had the grace to look ashamed. "That's different, is it? We both kept secrets. The difference is that my secret wasn't designed to exclude or hurt you." David sank onto the couch, his shoulders slumping. "It's complicated. My family, they're what, David? So important that their wishes outweigh your marriage vows? So special that their annual vacation takes precedence over honesty with your wife? You don't understand," he protested weakly. My mother, she can be difficult. It was just easier to lie to me? I finished for him. To let me believe you were at a conference while you were vacationing with them? To make me the only member of the family excluded from this gathering year after year? He had no answer for that, his gaze dropping to his hands. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely audible. I'm sorry. 2 simple words, yet they felt wholly inadequate given the scope of his betrayal. I moved to sit in the chair opposite him, maintaining the physical distance that now mirrored the emotional. Gulf between us. Sorry doesn't explain why, David. I need to understand why you would do this. Why you would hurt me this way. He sighed heavily. It started before we were married. Mom and Dad, they've always had this vision of the family they wanted me to have. When I told them about you, about us getting serious, they disapproved, I supplied. They were concerned, he corrected, though we both knew it was the same thing. You weren't from their world, didn't have their connections. Mom especially thought it was a mistake. And you never stood up to her. It wasn't a question. David flinched. I tried, in the beginning. But you don't know what she's like when she doesn't get her way. The cold silence, the passive-aggressive comments, the way she can turn the entire family against you without saying a word directly. So you chose peace with your mother over respect for your wife. The words tasted bitter. It wasn't like that, he insisted, though his eyes told a different story. I thought I could have both. Keep the family harmony and have our life together. The annual vacation was their thing, and it seemed easier to just go along with it. By lying to me? By making me think you were working when you were actually playing happy family without me? He had no defense for this. His silence, an admission of guilt. I stood and walked to the window, looking out at the darkened lake, its surface now a canvas of reflected stars. Do you know what hurts the most, David? Not that your family doesn't accept me. I came to terms with that, years ago. It's that you didn't believe I was worth fighting for. That when forced to choose, you chose them every single time. That's not fair, he protested, rising to his feet. I love you. I chose you when I married you. I turned to face him. Did you? Because from where I stand, it looks like you've been choosing them at every opportunity. Holidays spent mostly at their house. Weekends rearranged to accommodate their schedules. And now this, an entire vacation built on lies. The truth of my words landed between us, heavy and undeniable. David ran his hands through his hair, a gesture of frustration I'd seen 1,000 times before. What do you want me to say, Emma? That I've been a coward? Fine. I've been a coward. That I should have stood up to them years ago? Yes, I should have. But it's not that simple. Actually, it is that simple, I replied, surprised by the calm certainty in my voice. When you love someone, you choose them. You stand by them. You don't let anyone, not even your parents, treat them as less than. He took a step toward me. I do love you. But you don't respect me. The realization crystallized as I spoke it. If you did, we wouldn't be having this conversation. David's expression crumpled. For a moment, he looked like a lost boy rather than a grown man. The confident facade stripped away to reveal the insecurity beneath. I don't know how to fix this. I studied him. This man I had loved for 5 years. The man I had built a life with. Could we rebuild what his deception had broken? Did I even want to try? I don't know either, I admitted. But I do know that things can't continue as they have been. I won't be the wife who waits at home while you choose your family over her. I won't accept scraps of your loyalty while they get the feast. What are you saying? Alarm-colored. His voice. I'm saying that you have a choice to make, David. A real one. not the half measures and compromises you've been getting away with. If you want our marriage to survive, something has to change fundamentally." He nodded slowly, the gravity of the situation finally sinking in. "I understand. Do you? Because this isn't just about this vacation. It's about every time you've let your mother's disapproval dictate our lives. It's about every lie you've told to keep the peace with them at the expense of our relationship." David moved to the sofa and sat heavily, as though the weight of his choices had suddenly become physical. What happens now? It was a good question, one I had been asking myself since I'd discovered the hidden invitation. What did I want to happen? Revenge had never been my goal, despite the satisfaction of today's revelation. What I wanted was respect, honesty, partnership, all the things I had thought our marriage contained. "Now," I said, "you need to decide what kind of man you want to be, and I need to decide if I can trust you again, no matter what choice you make." He looked up at me, his expression pained. "And in the meantime?" "In the meantime, you have a family vacation to finish. I have a resort to run, and we both have some thinking to do." David stood, clearly wanting to say more but finding no words. Finally, he simply nodded. "When will I see you again?" "I'll be here all week," I replied, "just like you and your family. We can talk again when you've had time to reflect on what you really want." He moved to the door, pausing with his hand on the knob. "For what it's worth, I am sorry. Not just for lying about the vacation, but for all of it. For not being the husband you deserve." "I know," I said softly, "but sometimes sorry isn't enough." After he left, I sank onto the bed, emotions washing over me in waves. Despite the controlled facade I had maintained throughout our conversation, I felt raw inside, as though layers of myself had been peeled away to expose something tender and vulnerable beneath. For so long, I had been focused on earning the Turners' approval, on making myself acceptable in their eyes. I had dimmed my light, softened my edges, all to fit within the narrow boundaries of their expectations. And David, rather than expanding those boundaries to include me, had simply helped his family maintain them, even at the cost of our relationship's integrity. Now, for the first time, I was stepping fully into my own identity, not as David's wife or the Turners' unwanted daughter-in-law, but as Emma Fletcher, successful businesswoman and resort owner. The woman who had built something beautiful and enduring, the woman who no longer needed anyone's validation but her own. As I prepared for bed, I realized that whatever happened with David, with our marriage, I would be all right. The revelation wasn't just about exposing his deception or asserting ownership of Evergreen Shores. It was about reclaiming ownership of myself. I slept surprisingly well, waking with the dawn to watch the sunrise paint the lake in shades of pink and gold. The beauty of the scene affirmed my connection to this place, this investment I had made long before David entered my life. It had been mine then, and it was mine now, regardless of what happened between us. After breakfast, I met again with Marcus to review some proposed renovations to the resort's spa facilities. It felt good to immerse myself in the business, to focus on concrete decisions rather than the emotional complexities of my personal life. The early feedback on the new wellness program has been exceptionally positive, Marcus was saying as we walked through the existing spa area. If we expand as proposed, we could increase capacity by 30% while maintaining the exclusive atmosphere. Let's move forward with it, I decided. And I'd like to be more involved in the planning process, even after I returned to Chicago. Marcus looked pleased. We'd welcome that, Mrs. Fletcher. Your vision has always been the foundation of what makes Evergreen Shores special. As we concluded our tour, I spotted Patricia Turner in the resort's boutique, examining an expensive cashmere wrap. She hadn't noticed me yet, and for a moment, I considered avoiding the encounter. But that would be the old Emma, the one who shrank from confrontation. The new Emma squared her shoulders and approached. "Good morning, Patricia. Finding everything you need?" She startled, nearly dropping the garment. "Emma, I didn't expect to see you. Working here." I smiled pleasantly. "Just checking in." "On operations. The boutique is one of our most popular amenities." Patricia replaced the wrap on its display, her movements precise. "Yes, well, they do carry lovely things. Rather expensive, though." "Quality usually is," I replied, maintaining my professional demeanor despite her obvious attempt to remind me of the class differences she perceived between us. "But our guests appreciate the value." She smoothed her already immaculate hair, a nervous habit I'd observed over years of uncomfortable family dinners. "I suppose you'll be joining us for all the family activities now?" The question revealed just how deeply yesterday's revelation had unsettled her. Patricia Turner, who had spent decades cultivating the perfect family image, now faced the possibility of her carefully controlled narrative being disrupted. "I'm quite busy with resort." "Business," I told her. "But thank you for the belated invitation." She flinched at the subtle emphasis on belated, but recovered quickly. "We've always had a certain way of doing things, Emma. Our traditions are important to us." "I understand tradition, Patricia. What I don't understand is deliberate exclusion and lying." Her eyes widened slightly, unused to such direct confrontation. "I don't know what David has told you, but—" "David hasn't told me much," I interrupted gently. "That's rather the point." Patricia glanced around, ensuring no one was within earshot. When she spoke again, her voice was lower, intense. "You need to understand something. The Turner family has a certain position to maintain, certain expectations. David was raised with those expectations. And I don't meet them," I finished for her. She didn't deny it. "You come from different circumstances." "You mean I'm not rich enough, not connected enough, not pedigreed enough?" Patricia's lips thinned. "You're being deliberately crude." "No, I'm being honest. Something this family might try occasionally." For a moment, something like respect flickered in her eyes, quickly masked. "You've certainly proven resourceful," she admitted grudgingly. "Owning this place, revealing it the way you did. Very dramatic." I could almost laugh at her reduction of my business accomplishment to mere theatrics. "It wasn't meant to be dramatic, Patricia. It was meant to be honest. Something had to break this cycle of deception." She considered this, her calculating mind visibly reassessing me. I was no longer just the working-class girl who had somehow entrapped her son. I was a businesswoman of means, the owner of her favorite resort. The landscape had shifted, and Patricia Turner was nothing if not adaptive. "Perhaps," she allowed, "there have been misunderstandings." "Not misunderstandings," I corrected firmly. "Choices, deliberate ones, made by you, by William, and by David. Choices that hurt me and damaged my marriage." Patricia's expression hardened again. "You can hardly blame us for David's decisions." "I don't. I blame David for David's decisions, but I also recognize the pressure you've applied, the disapproval you've wielded like a weapon. You've made it clear from day one that I wasn't what you wanted for your son." She didn't deny this either. "We only want what's best for him." "No," I said softly. "You want what's best for your family image. If you wanted what was best for David, you would have supported his marriage, not undermined it at every turn." For once, Patricia Turner had no ready reply. We stood in silence among the luxury goods of the boutique, two women who had been locked in an unacknowledged battle for years, finally confronting the truth of their relationship. "I should go," she said finally. "William is waiting." I nodded, stepping aside to let her pass. As she reached the door, I called after her, Patricia? She turned, one perfectly manicured eyebrow raised in question. I hope you enjoy the rest of your stay at Evergreen Shores. The sunset cruise this evening is particularly beautiful. A complex emotion crossed her face: irritation, confusion, and perhaps a reluctant acknowledgement. With a curt nod, she departed, her posture rigid with unresolved tension. I watched her go, feeling strangely lightened by the encounter. For years, Patricia Turner had loomed in my mind as an immovable force, the disapproving matriarch whose approval I would never earn. Now, having finally spoken my truth to her directly, I realized she held no power over me that I didn't willingly give her. The remainder of the day passed in a blur of business meetings and property tours. I deliberately kept myself busy, avoiding the areas where I knew the Turner family would be gathered. This confrontation needed to unfold at its own pace, each of us processing the seismic shifts in our relationships. Late in the afternoon, as I was reviewing staffing schedules with the head of housekeeping, my phone buzzed with a text from David. "Can we talk again? Dinner in your suite? 7 p.m.? I hesitated, then replied, "Okay." Whatever was coming, I would face it with the same strength and clarity that had carried me through the past 2 days. The old Emma might have approached this conversation with anxiety, desperate to preserve her marriage at any cost. The new Emma knew her worth, understood her boundaries, and was prepared to stand by them, even if it meant walking away from the life she had built with David. As the sun began its descent toward the horizon, casting long golden shadows across the resort grounds, I returned to my suite to prepare for whatever the evening would bring. The lake stretched before me, vast and unchanging, a reminder that some things endure regardless of the human dramas that unfold upon their shores. I changed into a simple navy dress for dinner, elegant but understated. At precisely 7, there was a knock at my suite door. When I opened it, David stood there holding a bouquet of wildflowers, not the manicured roses or exotic blooms his mother would have preferred, but the natural, free-growing flowers that dotted the resort's meadows. "I picked these myself," he said, offering them to me with an uncertain smile. "From that field by the North Trail." I accepted them, surprised by the gesture. In our 5 years together, David had always given conventional gifts: jewelry, perfume, designer items his mother had likely suggested. These wildflowers represented something different, something uniquely his. "Thank you," I said, stepping aside to let him enter. "They're beautiful." He looked different tonight, less the polished corporate lawyer and more the man I'd fallen in love with years ago. His hair was slightly rumpled, his expression open and vulnerable. "I ordered dinner from the kitchen," I told him, gesturing to the table on the balcony where our meal waited under silver covers. "I hope that's all right." "Perfect," he said, though I could tell food was the last thing on his mind. We settled. At the table, the lake stretching before us, painted in twilight hues of purple and deep blue. For a few minutes, we ate in silence, the weight of unspoken words hanging between us. Finally, David set down his fork and looked directly at me. "I've been thinking about everything you said yesterday," he began. "About the choices I've made, about our marriage. You were right, Emma. All of it. I've been a coward, allowing my family to dictate terms that hurt you, that hurt us." I set my own fork down, studying his face. There was a sincerity there I hadn't seen in a long time. "What brought on this realization?" He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "After our talk, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying moments from our marriage, seeing them through your eyes instead of mine. The holidays where we'd spend 3 hours at your family's home and 3 days at mine. The way my mother would make those subtle comments about your background, and I'd just sit there saying nothing. And this vacation," I added quietly, "especially this vacation." He looked away, shame evident in his expression. "I've been coming on these trips without you since we got married, always with some excuse. At first, I told myself it was temporary, that I'd find a way to integrate you into these family traditions gradually. But that never happened, and I just went along with it, year after year." A small, sad smile touched my lips. It's strange, isn't it? How we can justify almost anything to ourselves if we try hard enough. "I called my mother this afternoon," David said, surprising me. "After her little encounter with you in the boutique." I raised an eyebrow. "And?" "I told her that I was done with the secrecy, the exclusion, that you were my wife, and if she couldn't accept that, accept you, then she was the one who would be excluded from now on, not you." He paused, a small, tight smile forming. She didn't take it well. I could imagine Patricia's reaction. The icy silence, the manipulation, the veiled threats about family legacy and responsibility. "What happened?" David's smile grew more genuine. "Something unexpected. My father spoke up. He told her that she had taken this too far, that her behavior was threatening to cost them their son. I've never heard him stand up to her like that before." "William said that?" I couldn't keep the surprise from my voice. William Turner had always been the silent partner in his marriage, acquiescing to Patricia's every decree. He did. And then Michael and Jennifer joined in. Apparently, they've been uncomfortable with how you've been treated for years but didn't want to rock the boat. He shook his head in disbelief. It turns out I wasn't the only coward in the family. I took a sip of wine, processing this information. The Turner family dynamics were shifting, fault lines appearing in what had seemed an impenetrable wall of opposition. And Patricia? How did she respond to this family rebellion? She left in a huff, locked herself in their suite. But William stayed, and we all talked, really talked, for the first time in years. David reached across the table, his fingers stopping just short of mine. "They want to make amends, Emma. All of them. Even Mother, once she's had time to adjust." I studied him, weighing his words against the years of hurt, the pattern of exclusion that had become so familiar. "And you? What do you want, David?" His eyes met mine, clear and direct. "I want us. I want a fresh start. A marriage where I actually behave like a partner instead of a man with divided loyalties. I want to stand beside you, not between you, and my family." There was a passion in his voice I hadn't heard in a long time, a certainty that stirred something within me. But the wounds were still fresh, the trust still broken. "Those are beautiful words," I said carefully. "But words are easy, David. It's actions that matter." "I know." He nodded solemnly. "That's why I'm asking for a chance to prove it to you, day by day, choice by choice." I looked out at the lake, its surface now scattered with the reflections of emerging stars. Part of me wanted to believe him, to accept this apparent epiphany at face value. But another part, the part that had been hurt too many times, remained cautious. What about next time your mother disapproves of something? What happens when she wants her way again? "Then I'll make the right choice," he said firmly. "The choice I should have been making all along. You, Emma, us, our marriage." I turned back to him, studying the earnest expression on his face. "I want to believe you, David. But trust, once broken, isn't easily repaired. I know that too." He finally reached for my hand, his touch tentative. "All I'm asking is for the chance to try." I didn't pull away, letting his fingers entwine with mine. The familiar warmth of his skin against mine brought back a flood of memories, good ones, of laughter and love and connection. Despite everything, there was still something there, something worth fighting for. "It won't be easy," I warned him. I can't just forget what happened. I wouldn't expect you to, he assured me. I don't deserve easy forgiveness. What I'm asking for is a path forward, however difficult. I considered his words, weighing them against the pain of the past and the uncertainty of the future. Finally, I nodded slowly. All right, we can try. The relief that washed over his face was almost palpable. Thank you, he whispered, squeezing my hand gently. We finished our dinner in a more comfortable silence, the first tentative steps toward reconnection taken. When David left shortly before midnight, his goodbye kiss was gentle, undemanding, a question rather than a presumption. Sleep came easier that night, though my dreams were a jumble of images. David and his family on their boat, Patricia's cold, assessing gaze, the wildflowers now sitting in a vase by my bedside. I woke feeling neither certain nor doubtful, but somewhere in between, cautiously hopeful yet wary of disappointment. The next morning dawned clear and bright, the lake a dazzling blue under the summer sun. I dressed in casual resort wear, linen pants and a sleeveless blouse, and made my way to the main restaurant for breakfast. As I approached, I saw the entire Turner family seated at their usual table on the terrace. David spotted me and stood, waving me over with a smile that held equal parts hope and nervousness. For a moment I hesitated. Joining them meant stepping into the lion's den, facing Patricia and the others in the cold light of morning. It would be easier to turn away, to maintain my comfortable distance. But the new Emma didn't choose the easy path. I walked toward their table, chin high, steps measured and confident. As I neared, I noticed the subtle shift in their postures, William straightening slightly, Jennifer and Michael exchanging glances, David's smile widening with relief. Only Patricia remained rigid, her gaze fixed on her coffee cup. Good morning? I greeted them, my voice pleasant but not overly warm. Emma! Jennifer was the first to respond, her smile seeming genuinely welcoming. Please join us. We were just discussing the day's activities. David pulled out the empty chair beside his. We saved you a spot, he said, the simple statement carrying layers of meaning. As I sat, a server appeared almost instantly. Mrs. Fletcher, good morning. Your usual breakfast? I nodded, appreciating the subtle reminder of my position. Yes, thank you, James. A brief silence fell over the table, everyone seemingly unsure how to proceed. It was William who finally broke it, clearing his throat with deliberate authority. Emma, I believe we owe you an apology, he said, his lawyer's voice softened by what appeared to be genuine remorse. Our treatment of you has been unacceptable. Speaking for myself, I'm deeply sorry. His direct acknowledgement caught me by surprise. William had always been polite but distant, deferring to Patricia in all family matters. Thank you, William, I replied, measuring my words carefully. I appreciate that. Jennifer and Michael murmured their own apologies, their expressions sheepish. Even Michael's wife, Lisa, who had always been friendly, looked ashamed of her complicity in my exclusion. Throughout this exchange, Patricia remained silent, her posture rigid, her gaze still fixed on her coffee. David shot her a pointed look, which she studiously ignored. Mother? He said finally, his tone insistent. Patricia looked up at last, her expression a complex mixture of pride and resignation. I may have been overly protective of our family traditions, she conceded, the words clearly costing her. I nearly laughed at the understatement, but managed to maintain my composure. I understand the importance of tradition, Patricia. I simply believe that traditions can evolve to include new members rather than exclude them. She regarded me with new eyes, reassessing. Yes, well, perhaps we can discuss how to accommodate changes in the future. It wasn't exactly a warm welcome. But from Patricia Turner, it was practically a bear hug. David squeezed my hand. Under the table, a silent acknowledgement of the moment's significance. My breakfast arrived, and the conversation shifted to lighter topics. The perfect weather, the excellence of the resort's kitchen, plans for the day's activities. I participated minimally, observing the family dynamics with fresh eyes. Jennifer's obvious relief at the reduced tension, Michael's measured diplomacy, William's sudden attentiveness to the conversation rather than his phone, and Patricia, slowly thawing degree by degree, occasionally offering me a direct comment or question. "The gardens here are exceptional," she noted during a lull in the conversation. "Do you oversee the landscaping personally?" "I approve the major designs," I replied, "but we have a talented team that handles the day-to-day management." She nodded approvingly. The attention to detail shows. Very elegant, not overly structured. Coming from Patricia, this was high. Praise indeed. I inclined my head in acknowledgement. "Thank you. I believe in creating spaces that feel natural while still maintaining a sense of design." "A difficult balance to achieve," she observed, and for a moment, I glimpsed what might have been respect in her eyes. After breakfast, David suggested a walk along the lakeshore trail. I agreed, curious to see if our tentative reconciliation would hold up in the light of day, away from the watchful eyes of his family. We strolled in comfortable silence for a while, the path winding through stands of pine and birch before emerging along the rocky shoreline. The lake stretched before us, vast and blue, sailboats dotting the horizon like white butterflies. "Thank you for joining us this morning," David said finally. "I know it couldn't have been easy." "Surprisingly, it wasn't as difficult as I expected," I admitted. "Your father's apology seemed genuine." David nodded, hands in his pockets as we walked. "It was. He came to my room last night after I spoke with you. Said he'd been thinking about his own marriage, how he'd always chosen the path of least resistance with Mother, and how he didn't want me to make the same mistake." I raised an eyebrow. "William said that? About Patricia?" "I was as shocked as you are." David chuckled softly. Apparently, watching this situation unfold has sparked some reflection on his part. He mentioned something about reclaiming his backbone before it's too late. The idea of William Turner standing up to his wife after decades of acquiescence was almost unbelievable. Yet I'd seen a hint of this new dynamic at breakfast, the way he'd led the conversation, the subtle authority in his manner. "And your mother?" Her apology was minimal. David sighed. "For her, it was practically groveling. She's never been good at admitting she's wrong. But the fact that she said anything at all is significant. Trust me, this is her version of waving a white flag." We reached a small outcropping of rocks jutting into the lake and paused there, the gentle splash of waves against stone creating a soothing rhythm. "I meant what I said last night, Emma," David said, turning to face me fully. "I want things to be different, not just with my family, but between us. I've been taking you for granted, prioritizing peace over honesty. That ends now." I studied his face, searching for the sincerity behind his words. It's easy to say that here, now, with everything out in the open. The real test will come later, when we're back in our normal lives. "I know." He took my hands in his touch warm and familiar. "That's why I want to make some concrete changes. Regular therapy, for me individually, and for us as a couple. Clear boundaries with my family. No more secrets, no more separate vacations." His specific proposals surprised me. David had always resisted therapy, viewing it as unnecessary for what he'd termed manageable family stress. "You're serious about this," I observed, not quite a question. "Completely." He squeezed my hands gently. "Finding that invitation, discovering this place was yours all along, it was like a wake-up call, Emma. I've been sleepwalking through our marriage, taking the path of least resistance. I don't want to live like that anymore." Something in his voice, in the steadiness of his gaze, reached past my defenses. This wasn't the placating David who would say anything to restore peace. This was the man I'd fallen in love with years ago. Direct, sincere, fully present. "All right," I said softly. "We'll try it your way. Therapy, boundaries, honesty." The smile that lit his face was worth the risk of trust. He pulled me into an embrace, holding me close against the backdrop of the vast lake. For the first time in longer than I could remember, I allowed myself to lean into him fully, to accept the comfort of his arms without reservation. We continued our walk, talking more openly than we had in years. About his insecurities regarding his family's expectations, about my frustration at always feeling like an outsider, about the small compromises that had gradually eroded the foundation of our relationship. By the time we circled back to the resort, something had shifted between us. Not a complete healing, but the beginning of one. As we approached the main building, I spotted Patricia standing alone on the upper terrace, watching us. When she saw me notice her, she didn't look away, but instead raised her hand in a small, stiff wave. I returned the gesture, equally reserved. "Progress," David murmured, following my gaze. "Microscopic, but progress nonetheless." "Rome wasn't built in a day," I replied, surprising myself with the hint of humor in my voice. We parted at the entrance, David heading to join his father for a round of golf, me to meet with Marcus about a staff training initiative. Before he left, David kissed me lightly, not the perfunctory peck of recent months, but something more meaningful, a promise of things to come. The remainder of the day passed in a productive blur of meetings and resort business. By late afternoon, I found myself unexpectedly enjoying my role as active owner rather than distant investor. The staff responded to my direct involvement with enthusiasm, offering insights and suggestions they might not have shared through formal channels. "You've built something remarkable here, Mrs. Fletcher," Marcus commented as we concluded our final meeting. The team feels it. There's a sense of purpose, of pride, that's rare in this industry. "Thank you, Marcus," I replied, genuinely touched. "Though much of the credit goes to you and the management team. Your vision has shaped Evergreen Shores as much as mine." He shook his head slightly. "We've implemented the details, certainly, but the guiding philosophy, creating a place that balances luxury with authenticity, that respects both guests and environment, that came from you." His words stayed with me as I returned to my suite to prepare for the evening ahead. The Turners had invited me to join their traditional family dinner, a formal affair held in one of the resort's private dining rooms. The invitation, delivered by Jennifer in person rather than through David, represented another small step toward inclusion. As I dressed for dinner, selecting a simple but elegant black dress and pearl earrings, I reflected on the unexpected turns of the past few days. What had begun as a mission of revelation, of righteous anger, had transformed into something more nuanced, a reclaiming not just of my place in David's family, but of my own sense of accomplishment and worth. The private dining room was located in the resort's west wing, overlooking the lake where the sunset painted the water in shades of orange and gold. When I arrived, the family was already gathered. William and Patricia near the windows, Jennifer and her husband by the fireplace, Michael and Lisa chatting with their older children, while the youngest played on a tablet in the corner. David crossed the room immediately to greet me, his smile warm and private. "You look beautiful," he murmured, offering his arm to lead me into the room. Patricia watched our approach, her expression carefully neutral. She wore her signature pearls and a navy dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. Her hair arranged in its usual perfect coif. But something about her seemed different. Less imperious, perhaps, or simply more aware of her surroundings. "Emma," she greeted me, her tone almost cordial. Thank you for joining us. The view from this room is particularly lovely at sunset. It is, I agreed, accepting the glass of champagne a server offered. We designed it specifically to capture the western light. A flicker of something, acknowledgement perhaps, crossed Patricia's face at my casual reminder of my ownership. She nodded slightly, conceding the point. William approached, his manner more relaxed than I had ever seen it. Emma, I was just telling David that we should arrange a tour of the entire property before we leave. I'd love to hear more about your vision for this place. I'd be happy to show you around, I replied, genuinely surprised by his interest. In 5 years, William had rarely addressed more than perfunctory pleasantries to me directly. Excellent, he beamed, raising his glass in a mini toast. David tells me you've owned Evergreen Shores since before you met. That's quite an achievement for someone your age. The compliment, though wrapped in the faint condescension of someone, your age, was still more recognition than he had ever offered before. I accepted it with a gracious nod. Thank you. It was my first major investment. A very successful one, clearly, Jennifer chimed in, joining our circle. The resort has such a wonderful reputation. Now I understand why you were always so knowledgeable about investment strategies at those few family dinners you attended. Her words contained an unintentional barb, the reminder of how often I had been excluded from family gatherings. But her expression was genuinely friendly. I chose to focus on the latter. Property investment has always been a particular interest of mine, I acknowledged. Though I confess, Evergreen Shores has become more than just a business asset over the years. It shows, Jennifer said warmly. There's a personal touch here that most luxury resorts lack. The conversation flowed more easily after that, the initial awkwardness giving way to a cautious but genuine attempt at connection. When we moved to the dining table, I found myself seated between David and, surprisingly, Patricia herself. The first course arrived, a delicate salad of local greens and lake trout that I had personally approved on the seasonal menu months ago. As we ate, Patricia turned to me, her voice low enough that only I could hear. I understand now why you never mentioned owning this place, she said, surprising me with her directness. You must have thought we'd see it as some sort of social climbing. I considered deflecting with a polite platitude, but decided honesty would better serve the new dynamic we were attempting to establish. The thought had crossed my mind, I admitted. You've made your opinions about my background quite clear over the years. Patricia had the grace to look momentarily discomfited. Yes. Well, perhaps I've been overly concerned with certain traditions. Perhaps, I agreed mildly, taking a sip of my wine. She studied me over the rim of her own glass, her shrewd eyes assessing. You're not what I expected, Emma. I never have been, Patricia. That's rather the point. A hint of a smile, an expression I had rarely seen directed at me, touched her lips. Indeed, I'm beginning to see that might not be entirely a bad thing. It wasn't an apology, not really. But from Patricia Turner, it was an unprecedented concession. I returned the almost smile with one of my own, equally measured. Life is full of surprises. The remainder of the dinner unfolded with a gradually warming atmosphere. The food was excellent, the conversation increasingly genuine. Even the children were on their best behavior, clearly sensing the importance of the occasion. By the time dessert was served, a local berry tart with hand-churned vanilla ice cream, I found myself actually enjoying the evening. Not because the Turners had suddenly transformed into the warm, accepting family I had once hoped for, but because I no longer needed their approval to feel secure in my own identity. As coffee was poured, William surprised us all by rising to his feet, glass in hand. I'd like to propose a toast, he announced, his gaze encompassing the entire table before settling on me. To Emma, whose grace and forbearance in the face of our less than welcoming behavior has been remarkable. And to new beginnings for our family, all of our family. The unexpected tribute brought a flush to my cheeks. David reached for my hand under the table, squeezing it gently as the others raised their glasses in agreement. "To Emma," they echoed, even Patricia, though her voice was predictably more restrained than the others. After dinner, we moved to the adjoining sitting room where a fire had been lit against the evening chill. I found myself drawn into a conversation with Jennifer about the resort's environmental initiatives, her background in conservation making her genuinely interested rather than merely polite. Across the room, I noticed David deep in conversation with his father, their expressions serious yet relaxed. Patricia had engaged Lisa in what appeared to be a civil discussion about the children's education, while Michael supervised the youngsters' board game with patient attention. It was, in many ways, the family gathering I had always imagined. Warm, inclusive, genuine. Yet I knew better than to mistake one pleasant evening for a complete transformation. The patterns of a lifetime wouldn't dissolve overnight. There would be setbacks, moments of regression, old habits reasserting themselves. But for the first time, I believed change was possible. Not because the Turners had suddenly seen the error of their ways, but because I had finally found the courage to stand in my own truth, to claim my rightful place not as an apologetic outsider, but as a woman of substance and worth. As the evening drew to a close, David and I walked back to my suite together, the night air cool and fragrant with pine. Above us, stars scattered across the clear sky like diamonds on black velvet, their ancient light a reminder of how small our human dramas truly were. "That went well," David observed, his hand warm in mine. "Better than I could have hoped." "It did," I agreed. "Though we should be realistic about how much has really changed." He nodded, acknowledging the truth in my caution. "One dinner doesn't erase years of patterns, but it's a start, Emma. A real one." We reached my door, pausing in the soft glow of the porch light. David turned to face me, his expression earnest. "Will you come back to our suite tonight? I've missed you." I considered his invitation, weighing the progress of the day against the work still to be done in rebuilding our trust. "Not tonight," I decided gently. "We're moving in the right direction, David, but I think we both need time to process everything that's happened." Though disappointment flickered briefly in his eyes, he nodded in understanding. "You're right. We shouldn't rush this." He leaned in to kiss me goodnight, a tender moment that held the promise of renewal without presuming too much. As he pulled away, he tucked a strand of hair behind my ear, a gesture so familiar it made my heart ache with a mixture of memory and hope. "Good night, Emma. I love you." The words, so simple yet profound, hung in the air between us. For a moment, I hesitated, not because I didn't return the feeling, but because I wanted my response to be honest, not automatic. "I love you too," I said finally, knowing it was true despite everything. "That's why this matters so much." He nodded, understanding the layers in my response. With a last gentle touch to my cheek, he turned and walked away, his steps measured and thoughtful in the quiet night. Inside my suite, I moved to the balcony, gazing out at the lake now silvered by moonlight. The events of the past few days played through my mind like scenes from a film. Discovering the invitation, confronting David and his family, reclaiming my place as both resort owner and family member. It had been a journey I never expected to take, one that had revealed strengths I hadn't known I possessed, and truths I had been afraid to face. Whatever happened next, with David, with the Turners, with my own evolving sense of identity, I knew I would approach it with a newfound clarity and confidence. The wind stirred the trees, their branches swaying gently against the star-strewn sky. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new conversations, new opportunities for growth or regression. But tonight, In this moment of quiet reflection, I allowed myself to simply be present, with my accomplishments, my choices, my hard-won wisdom. For the first time in years, I felt fully myself, not David's wife or the Turners' unwanted daughter-in-law, but simply Emma Fletcher, a woman who had built something beautiful in the world and was finally learning to claim her rightful place within it. The final family dinner of the Turner vacation had a distinctly different atmosphere from previous gatherings. We sat at a circular table on the resort's finest dining terrace, the setting sun casting a golden glow across the lake beyond. For once, the seating wasn't a careful hierarchy with Patricia at the symbolic head. Instead, we arranged ourselves, casually, conversations flowing across the table rather than being directed by Patricia's orchestration. David sat beside me, his hand occasionally finding mine beneath the table, a private connection amid the family dynamic. William had taken charge of ordering wine, selecting a local Michigan vintage I had added to the resort's cellar the previous year. Even the children seemed more relaxed, their behavior natural rather than performance perfect for their grandmother's approval. "I've been thinking," Patricia announced during a lull in conversation, her voice carrying that familiar authoritative tone that typically preceded some declaration of Turner family protocol, "about Christmas this year." I felt David tense slightly beside me, his fingers tightening around mine. Christmas had always been a particular battlefield in our marriage, Patricia insisting on elaborate multi-day celebrations at the Turner mansion, my own family's simpler traditions relegated to a brief visit if acknowledged at all. "What about it, Mother?" David asked, his voice carefully neutral. Patricia dabbed her napkin to her lips before continuing. "I thought perhaps we might try something different this year, a change of venue." William looked up from his meal, surprise evident in his expression. Patricia Turner did not suggest changes to established family traditions. "What did you have in mind?" Jennifer asked, clearly as curious as the rest of us. Patricia's gaze met mine directly across the table. "I was thinking we might inquire about the availability of Evergreen Shores for the holiday. If Emma approves, of course. The winter views must be spectacular, and it would give us all a neutral setting to establish some new traditions." The suggestion hung in the air, its significance far beyond a mere change of location. Patricia was proposing a fundamental shift in Turner family dynamics, moving Christmas from her controlled domain to my territory, acknowledging my place in the family not as an interloper, but as a member with standing and contribution. "The resort is typically fully booked for the holidays," I replied carefully, "but I believe we could arrange accommodations for the family." "Wonderful," Patricia said with a brisk nod, as though the matter were settled. "And perhaps your parents might join us for part of the celebration. I understand they enjoy winter sports, and the resort's cross-country skiing trails are quite renowned." The inclusion of my family, never before invited to any significant Turner gathering, rendered me momentarily speechless. David squeezed my hand supportively, clearly as surprised as I was by his mother's olive branch. "I'm sure they would enjoy that," I managed finally. "They've actually never visited Evergreen Shores." Patricia's eyebrows rose slightly. "Never? But you've owned it for years." "The timing never seemed right," I said diplomatically, avoiding mentioning that my parents' visits to Michigan had typically coincided with Turner family events from which they were excluded. "Well, this Christmas would be the perfect opportunity then," Patricia declared, signaling to the server for a coffee refill. "William and I could host a welcome dinner the first evening, something casual but elegant." The planning continued, Patricia approaching the reorganization of Christmas traditions with the same efficiency she applied to all family matters. But there was something different in her manner, a new inclusiveness, small moments where she actually solicited others' preferences and opinions rather than simply dictating arrangements. As dessert was served, a local cherry tart with house-made ice cream, William raised his glass in a toast. "To family," he said simply, his gaze encompassing everyone at the table before settling warmly on me. All of our family. The gesture, small but significant, brought a lump to my throat. 5 years of feeling like an outsider, of trying to earn a place at this table, and now this quiet acknowledgement of belonging offered freely, without conditions or qualifications. To family, everyone echoed, even Patricia, though her voice carried a hint of emotion she quickly masked by taking a sip of her wine. After dinner, as the evening cooled, the staff lit the large fire pit on the adjacent terrace. We gathered around it, wrapped in light blankets provided by the attentive resort team, the conversation continuing to flow with an ease I had never experienced at a Turner family gathering. Jennifer and I continued our newfound connection, discussing art and books while her husband entertained the children with elaborate shadow puppets cast by the firelight. Michael and David engaged in a conversation about environmental law that reflected David's emerging interest in the field, their animated discussion suggesting Michael's support for his brother's potential career shift. Most surprisingly, William and Patricia sat slightly apart from the others, engaged in what appeared to be a serious, intimate conversation, their heads bent together, his hand occasionally covering hers in a gesture of reassurance or emphasis. "They're discussing their relationship," David murmured, following my gaze to his parents. "Dad told me this morning he's insisted on marriage counseling when they return to Chicago. Says they've been living parallel lives for too long." I studied the couple with new interest, noting the mixture of tension and tenderness in their interaction. "Do you think they'll actually go through with it?" David nodded, his expression thoughtful. "I do. Something's changed for both of them. I think watching our confrontation, seeing what happens when unaddressed issues finally surface, was a wake-up call. The idea that our marital conflict might have prompted healing in other relationships was strangely comforting. Perhaps there was value in bringing truth to light, however painful the process. As the fire burned lower and the night deepened, the family gradually dispersed to their suites. The children first, yawning despite their protests. Then Jennifer, and her husband followed by Michael and Lisa. William and Patricia rose together, approaching us before departing. "This has been a memorable vacation," William said, his tone suggesting multiple layers of meaning. "Not at all what we expected, but perhaps exactly what we needed." Patricia, standing straight and dignified beside him, added with uncharacteristic humility, "We hope you'll both join us for dinner when we return to Chicago. At our home. A proper dinner, with time for conversation." The invitation, extended without conditions or manipulations, was yet another sign of the shifting paradigm between us. "We'd like that," I replied, speaking for both David and myself. After they left, David and I remained by the fire, watching the embers glow in the darkness. Above us, stars scattered across the clear night sky, their ancient light a reminder of how small our human dramas truly were in the cosmic scale. "What are you thinking?" David asked softly, his arm warm around my shoulders. I considered the question, trying to articulate the complex mixture of emotions the week had evoked. "I'm thinking about expectations versus reality. How I came here prepared for confrontation, for righteous anger, for finally standing up for myself. And instead, I found something more complicated. Growth, maybe, in all of us." I turned to look at him, his face half illuminated by the dying fire. "I'm not naive enough to think everything is magically fixed. Your mother hasn't transformed overnight into a warm, accepting person. The family dynamics are still complex. But there's been a shift, an opening of possibilities I didn't anticipate." David nodded, his expression thoughtful. "I feel it too. Like we've all been forced to see each other clearly for the first time in years. Maybe ever." We sat in comfortable silence for a while longer, the gentle sound of waves lapping at the shore, a soothing backdrop to our thoughts. Finally, David spoke again, his voice low and serious. Come home with me tonight, to our suite. The invitation was quietly offered, without pressure or presumption. I studied his face in the firelight. This man I had chosen years ago. This man who was trying so hard to choose me now, fully and without reservation. Yes, I said simply. We walked hand in hand through the quiet resort, the path lit by elegant lamps casting pools of soft light. I found the invitation hidden in my husband's desk drawer, the elegant cream envelope addressed only to him. The Lake Michigan resort getaway his family had been planning for months, the one they'd deliberately kept secret from me. What they didn't realize was that years before I'd even met David, I had quietly purchased that very same resort through my investment company. Their expressions when they saw me walk through those doors as the owner would be worth every single moment of their betrayal. Hey, beautiful people, your support means everything to me. Help me reach my next big milestone by hitting that subscribe button. It's free, supports the channel, and ensures you never miss an amazing video. Where are you tuning in from today? Let me know in the comments. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The day I discovered I wasn't invited to my husband's family vacation felt like any other Tuesday. The morning light streamed through our kitchen windows. As I made coffee, the familiar aroma filling our modern suburban home outside of Chicago. I remember smoothing down my cardigan, the blue one David always said brought out my eyes, before heading to his office to leave a reminder note about dinner with my colleagues that evening. That's when I saw it, a cream-colored envelope peeking out from beneath a stack of papers in his half-open desk drawer. Something about the elegant script caught my eye, and before I could consider whether I should, I slid it out. The return address belonged to David's mother, Patricia. My fingers trembled slightly as I opened it, not entirely sure why I felt a sense of foreboding. Dear David, the note read in Patricia's perfect penmanship. We've finalized the arrangements for our annual family gathering at Evergreen Shores Resort, June 10-17. Everyone is looking forward to our tradition continuing without any complications this year. Your father has reserved your usual suite overlooking the lake. No need to respond. We'll see you there. Mom. I stood frozen, the invitation clutched in my hand as the implications washed over me. The family vacation, the one David had mentioned nothing about. The one his mother had specifically noted would continue without complications. The complication, I realized with a sickening clarity, was me. 5 years of marriage, and still, to Patricia and William Turner, I remained the outsider. The woman who wasn't good enough for their son. My crime? Coming from a working-class family in Detroit rather than Chicago's elite North Shore. Despite my MBA and successful career as an investment manager, I remained Emma Fletcher, the scholarship girl who had somehow managed to ensnare their precious son. I carefully replaced the invitation exactly as I'd found it, and walked out of the office, my mind racing. I needed time to think, to process this fresh betrayal. Instead of confronting David immediately, I went about my day, attending meetings, answering emails, smiling at colleagues, all while feeling like I was underwater, sounds muffled and movements slowed by the weight of what I'd discovered. That evening, David kissed me goodbye as I left for my dinner with colleagues, a dinner that no longer existed in my mind. Instead, I drove to Lake Michigan, finding a quiet spot along the shoreline where the water stretched endlessly before me. The early summer breeze carried the scent of the lake as waves gently lapped at the shore, a rhythmic pulse that seemed to echo the thoughts tumbling through my mind. It wasn't just the exclusion that cut so deeply, it was David's willingness to go along with it. No discussion, no defense of me to his family, not even the courtesy of a manufactured excuse. Just silence, deception, and the clear message that when forced to choose between me and his family's approval, I came second. As I sat watching the sunset paint the water in shades of gold and crimson, A strange calm settled over me. This wasn't the first slight from the Turner family, but something inside me had finally snapped. The hurt was transforming into something harder, colder, and infinitely more focused. I pulled out my phone and opened my calendar, scrolling to June. The dates Patricia had mentioned, June 10-17th, were blocked out in David's schedule with a vague business conference, Seattle. I laughed mirthlessly. A business conference. That's what he was planning to tell me when he abandoned me for a week to vacation with his family. 5 years of marriage reduced to a convenient lie. Then, as the last rays of sunlight disappeared, beneath the horizon, I remembered something that made me sit up straight, my heart suddenly racing with a new emotion. Not pain, but possibility. Evergreen Shores Resort. The name struck a chord of recognition so strong I could hardly believe. I hadn't made the connection immediately. 3 years before I'd even met David, I had made my first significant investment using the inheritance from my grandmother, a modest but beloved lakeside property in Michigan that had been transformed into an exclusive resort. Due to privacy, concerns for high-profile guests, I had made the purchase through a holding company, Lakeside Ventures, keeping my personal connection to the property quiet. Though I remained the majority owner, I had hired excellent management and rarely involved myself in day-to-day operations. The resort Patricia had mentioned, Evergreen Shores, was my resort, my property, the very place from which they had excluded me. The irony was so perfect it almost seemed orchestrated by fate. In their attempt to escape me, the Turner family had unwittingly chosen the one place where I had more right to be than any of them. For a moment, I just sat there in my car, stunned by the cosmic joke of it all. Then, slowly, a smile spread across my face as an idea began to take shape. I pulled out my phone again, this time dialing a number I rarely used. "Marcus, it's Emma Fletcher. Yes, it's been a while. I need to discuss Evergreen Shores. I'll be taking a more hands-on approach in June." By the time I returned home, my mind was clear and focused. David was in the living room, feet propped up on our coffee table, scrolling through his phone. He looked up when I entered, his handsome face breaking into the smile that had once made my heart race. "How was dinner?" he asked, patting the spot beside him on the couch. I settled next to him, my expression carefully neutral. "Illuminating," I replied truthfully. "How was your day?" "The usual. Nothing exciting." He shrugged, returning to his phone. I watched him for a moment. This man I had loved for 5 years. This man who was planning to lie to my face about an entire week of his life. I observed the familiar lines of his profile, the dark hair beginning to gray at the temples, the confident set of his shoulders. When had we started keeping secrets? When had I become someone he could so easily dismiss? "I was thinking," I said, casually, "we should plan something special for June. Maybe a trip. It's our anniversary month, after all." David's fingers stilled on his phone, just for a second. A pause so brief I might have missed it if I hadn't been watching for it. "June is pretty packed at work," he said, not meeting my eyes. "End of the fiscal year and all that. Maybe July would be better?" The lie slid so easily from his lips, practiced and smooth. I wondered how many others there had been over the years. How many small betrayals I had missed or chosen to ignore. Something cold settled in the pit of my stomach, but my voice remained light. "July, then," I agreed, rising from the couch. "I'm going to take a bath." As the hot water enveloped me, I began to plan. Not a confrontation. That would be too simple, too easily deflected with more lies and excuses. No, what I needed was a revelation, a moment of truth so perfect and complete that there would be no place for David or his family to hide from what they had done. The next morning, I called in sick to work for the first time in 3 years. The declaration, made without drama or expectation, reached past all my defenses to touch something essential within me. Not because I needed David to choose me. I had reclaimed my own worth independent of his validation, but because his choice represented the kind of authentic love I had always sought, a love based on clear seeing rather than idealization or obligation. "Thank you," I said simply, reaching up to touch his cheek. "I choose you too." We stood there a while longer, wrapped in each other's arms, the gentle lap of waves against the pilings creating a soothing rhythm beneath us. I thought about the compass William had given me, its needle pointing unerringly north despite changing winds or shifting tides. Perhaps that was what we had found this week. Not the perfect family or the flawless marriage, but our true north, the authentic core of who we were and what we could build together. As we finally turned to walk back to the resort, the future stretching before us complex but hopeful, I felt a sense of rightness settle deep within me. The revenge I had sought in revealing my ownership of Evergreen Shores had become something far more valuable, a reclamation not just of my place in the Turner family, but of my own voice, my own truth, my own power. The woman who drove away from Evergreen Shores that night, her husband beside her, and the resort lights fading in the rearview mirror, was not the same woman who had discovered the hidden invitation in David's desk just 1 week earlier. She was stronger, clearer, more fully herself, ready to build a life based not on accommodation or approval seeking, but on the solid foundation of her own worth and the courage to stand in her truth. And in that transformation lay the greatest victory of all. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. I smiled, keeping my voice level despite the hammering of my heart. I thought I'd surprise you. How was the flight from Seattle? Confusion flashed across his face, followed quickly by the dawning realization that he had been caught in his lie. He glanced around as though seeking an escape route, but there was nowhere to go, nothing to hide behind. "I can explain," he began, the most predictable words in the betrayer's vocabulary. "I'm sure you can," I interrupted smoothly. "You've always been good at explanations. But before you craft another fiction, perhaps you'd like to join me for a walk. There's something I'd like to show you." Without waiting for his response, I turned and began walking toward the south deck where, according to Marcus, the entire Turner family was gathered. After a moment's hesitation, David followed, his footsteps hurried and uneven behind me. "Emma, wait," he called, catching up to me. "This isn't what you think. Mom and Dad, they just what, David? Forgot to invite me? Again? Or did they specifically ask you to come alone and you just couldn't find the courage to say no? Or worse, didn't want to say no?" He flinched at the directness of my questions, his usual smooth confidence nowhere to be found. "It's complicated," he finally managed. "It always is," I agreed as we approached the doors leading to the south deck. "But some things are actually quite simple." I pushed open the doors, stepping out into the bright June sunshine. The expansive deck overlooked the shimmering blue of Lake Michigan, set with elegant tables where the Turner family was enjoying a leisurely lunch. Patricia was holding court at the center table, her silver blonde hair perfectly styled, her husband William beside her looking every inch the successful corporate lawyer in casual resort wear. David's younger sister Jennifer and her husband were there too, along with his older brother Michael and his wife, their children playing nearby under the watchful eye of a resort nanny. It was Patricia who noticed us first, her champagne glass pausing halfway to her lips as she registered my presence with visible shock. Conversations stilled as one by one. The Turners turned to stare at the unexpected addition to their carefully curated family gathering. "Emma?" Patricia's voice carried across the deck, sharp with surprise and displeasure. "What are you doing here?" I moved forward, David trailing uncertainly behind me. The perfect summer day continued around us, birds singing, waves lapping. At the shore below, children's laughter floating from the nearby gardens, while time seemed to freeze on the deck as everyone waited for my answer. "Hello, Patricia," I said, my voice carrying clearly in the sudden silence. "I'm so glad you're enjoying your stay at Evergreen Shores. I've been meaning to visit for quite some time." William stood, his expression a mixture of confusion and the beginning of anger. "Young lady, I don't know how you found out about our family gathering, but this is most inappropriate." I smiled, the expression not quite reaching my eyes. "Actually, William, what's inappropriate is excluding someone from a family event and lying about it, but that's not why I'm here." Before he could respond, Marcus appeared at my side, perfectly timed as we had arranged. "Mrs. Fletcher," he said deferentially, "is everything to your satisfaction? The chef wanted to know if you'd like to review the special menu for tomorrow night's event." A collective intake of breath swept through the assembled Turners. Patricia's eyes narrowed as she looked between Marcus and me, her quick mind putting the pieces together. "Mrs. Fletcher?" She repeated. "What is the meaning of this?" I turned to face them all, standing straight and tall in the sunshine of a perfect Michigan day, on the property that was mine, surrounded by people who had never thought I belonged. "I should have introduced myself properly years ago," I said, my voice clear and steady. "I'm Emma Fletcher, David's wife, yes, but I'm also the owner of Evergreen Shores Resort. Welcome to my property." The silence that followed was absolute, broken only by the distant call of gulls over the lake. 5 pairs of eyes stared at me in shock, but it was David's expression I focused on. The dawning realization, the disbelief, and beneath it all, the first glimmer of understanding just how profoundly he had underestimated the woman he had married. Patricia was the first to recover, her aristocratic features hardening into a mask of disbelief. "That's impossible," she declared. "Evergreen Shores is owned by Lakeside Ventures. It's been in their portfolio for years." Lakeside Ventures is my holding company, Patricia, I explained calmly. "I established it when I purchased this property 7 years ago. I'm surprised you never knew, given how thoroughly you research everything else." William's face had turned an interesting shade of red. "This is absurd," he sputtered. "You expect us to believe that you—" "It's true," Marcus interjected smoothly. "Mrs. Fletcher has been our principal owner since the resort's inception. We're honored to have her visiting in person this week." The implications of my revelation washed over the group in waves. They had excluded me from their gathering, only to unknowingly choose my property as their venue. They had been enjoying my hospitality while deliberately keeping me away. The irony was exquisite, and from the expressions around the table, not lost on anyone present. David stepped forward, his face a study in conflicted emotions. "Emma," he began, "why didn't you ever tell me about this place?" I turned to him, meeting his gaze directly. "Why didn't you ever tell me about this trip? We all have our secrets, it seems." In that moment, standing on the deck of the resort I owned but had never truly claimed, surrounded by the family that had never accepted me, I felt something shift inside me. A realignment of power, of truth, of possibility. The hurt was still there, the betrayal still fresh, but alongside it grew something new. A clear-eyed understanding of my own worth, independent of anyone else's validation. The story I had thought I was living, of the outsider desperately seeking acceptance, was over. A new narrative was beginning, one where I defined the terms, set the boundaries, and stood firmly in my own power. Whatever happened next, with David, with his family, with my life, would unfold from this moment of perfect clarity. As I looked out over Lake Michigan, its vast blue expanse glittering in the summer sun, I felt as boundless as the horizon, as steady as the ancient shoreline. The painful truth had finally emerged into the light, and in its illumination, I had found my strength. The expressions on the Turners' faces cycled through shock, disbelief, and dawning horror as my words sank in. Patricia's fingers tightened around her champagne flute, her knuckles turning white. The perfect family gathering she had orchestrated, deliberately excluding me, was now upended by my presence and the revelation of my ownership. "This is preposterous," William finally sputtered, lawyer instincts kicking in. "If this were true, we would have known. Our family has been coming here for years." "4 years," I corrected him gently. "And you've never once interacted with the ownership. Why would you? The management team handles everything." I gestured toward Marcus, who stood composed beside me. "Isn't that right, Marcus?" "Absolutely. Mrs. Fletcher," he affirmed. "We pride ourselves on discretion and ensuring our owner's privacy." David had remained frozen, staring at me as though seeing a stranger. All this time. The night air carried the scent of pine and water, the distinctive perfume of northern Michigan that had first enchanted me when I discovered this property years ago. David's suite, our suite now, I supposed, was larger than mine but similar. In design, the balcony offering the same spectacular view of the lake now silvered by moonlight. We moved around each other with the familiar choreography of a long-married couple, preparing for bed in comfortable silence. Later, lying beside him in the darkness, I felt a sense of homecoming that transcended physical location. Not because all our problems were solved. They weren't. And the work of rebuilding trust would continue long after we left Evergreen Shores. But because we had found our way back to a fundamental truth, that when stripped of expectations, pretenses, and accommodations, there remained between us something real and worth fighting for. "I love you," David murmured, his voice hovering on the edge of sleep. "The real you. Always have." "I love you too," I replied, meaning it completely. Enough to insist on the truth, even when it's difficult. He pulled me closer, his breathing gradually slowing toward sleep. I remained awake a while longer, listening to the distant sound of waves and reflecting on the unexpected journey of the past week. I had arrived at Evergreen Shores prepared to expose a betrayal, to claim my rightful place, to finally stand in my full power against those who had diminished me. I had achieved those goals, but in ways I could never have anticipated. The revelation of my ownership had indeed shifted the power dynamic, but the real transformation had come from within, from remembering who I was outside of the roles assigned to me, from reclaiming my voice and using it not just for confrontation, but for authentic connection. The Turners would never be the family I had once hoped for, warm, accepting, uncomplicated. They were who they were, complex, flawed, bound by traditions and expectations I would never fully share. But perhaps we had found something more valuable than the fantasy of perfect belonging, the beginning of honest relationship, grounded in reality rather than pretense. As for David and me, our marriage had been tested, exposed, its weaknesses laid bare for both of us to see. The comfortable illusions we had maintained, that minor compromises didn't matter, that avoiding conflict preserved harmony, that love could survive without honesty, had been permanently shattered. In their place, we were building something new, something stronger because it acknowledged our individual selves while seeking common ground. I drifted toward sleep, David's steady breathing beside me, the moonlight painting silver patterns across the ceiling. Tomorrow we would begin packing for the return to Chicago, to our regular lives now transformed by the truths we had faced at Evergreen Shores. There would be challenges ahead, moments of regression, old patterns asserting themselves when we least expected, but we would face them together, eyes open, standing in our truth. And in that knowledge, I found a peace more profound than any I had known in years, not the artificial peace of accommodation and compromise, but the deeper peace that comes from living authentically, loving honestly, and claiming one's rightful place in the world without apology or reservation. Morning came with gentle sunlight and the distant call of gulls over the lake. I woke to find David already up, standing on the balcony with 2 cups of coffee, gazing out at the water. I joined him, accepting the offered cup gratefully. "Last day," he said, nodding toward the resort grounds where staff were already preparing for the day's activities. "The family's scheduled for a farewell brunch at 11. And then back to reality," I added, taking a sip of the perfectly prepared coffee. Another small detail that reminded me of the early days of our relationship, when he had taken such care to learn my preferences. "A new reality," he corrected, gently turning to face me. "I've been thinking about what that might look like." The earnest expression on his face made me curious. "Tell me." "I want us to have regular time here," he said, gesturing toward the resort spread below us. "Not just occasional visits, but real involvement. This place is part of who you are, Emma. I want to share that, to understand it better." The suggestion touched me deeply. For years, I had kept Evergreen Shores separate from our marriage, partly to maintain something that was exclusively mine, partly because I had assumed David wouldn't be interested in this aspect of my life. "I'd like that," I admitted. "I've been thinking I should be more hands-on with the management anyway. Marcus does an excellent job, but there's value in an owner's direct involvement." David nodded encouragingly. "And with my sabbatical, we'll have the flexibility to spend extended periods here. Maybe a week each month? I could use the time to explore environmental law opportunities in the region." The image he painted, the 2 of us building a life that incorporated both our passions, neither subordinate to the other, was appealing. "That sounds perfect," I agreed, leaning against him as we gazed out at the resort together. The farewell brunch was held on the main dining terrace, a lavish spread of local specialties and breakfast classics arranged on elegant buffet tables. The Turner family arrived together, casual in their resort wear but still maintaining that indefinable aura of privilege and polish that characterized all their gatherings. "Emma! David!" Jennifer called, waving us over to the table they had selected. "We saved you seats." As we joined them, I noted again the subtle shift in family positioning. Patricia no longer dominated the center of the table. Her presence, still commanding but somehow less controlling. William engaged actively in conversation rather than retreating behind his phone. The children, relaxed and natural, moved between adults without the tense awareness of being perpetually evaluated. "We've been discussing plans for that Christmas gathering," Michael informed us as we settled into our seats. "Mother thinks we should make it an annual tradition. Evergreen Shores for the holidays." I glanced at Patricia, who nodded with her usual brisk efficiency. "The resort offers advantages our home cannot. Space for everyone to have proper accommodations, activities. For the children, that marvelous kitchen staff." She hesitated, then added with surprising sincerity, "And it would be appropriate to establish a new tradition that fully includes you, Emma." The acknowledgement, offered publicly before the entire family, meant more than I could express. I simply nodded my acceptance, not trusting my voice in that moment. The brunch continued with an ease I had never before experienced at a Turner family gathering. Conversations flowed naturally, laughter came readily, even the inevitable minor conflict, Michael's daughter spilling juice on Jennifer's white linen pants, was handled with humor rather than tension. As the meal concluded, William surprised us all by producing a small wrapped package which he presented to me with a somewhat self-conscious smile. "A small token of appreciation," he explained as I accepted the unexpected gift. "For your hospitality this week." I unwrapped it carefully, revealing a beautiful antique silver compass nestled in a velvet-lined box. Its craftsmanship was exquisite, the directional markings delicately engraved, the needle perfectly balanced. "It belonged to my grandfather," William explained. "He was a great explorer of these lakes in his day, charted many of the lesser-known islands and passages. I thought it fitting, given your connection to this remarkable shoreline." The gift left me momentarily speechless. For a Turner to part with a family heirloom, to offer it to the daughter-in-law they had long considered an outsider, represented a profound shift in perception and acceptance. "It's beautiful," I said finally, meeting William's gaze directly. "Thank you for entrusting me with it." He nodded, seemingly pleased by my recognition of the gesture's significance. "It should be with someone who appreciates these waters, who adds to their legacy, rather than simply inheriting it." The deeper meaning behind his words, the acknowledgement of what I had built, of my contribution beyond mere marriage into the Turner name, resonated deeply. This was not merely a pretty object, but a symbol of recognition, of respect earned rather than status conferred. As the family dispersed to complete their packing for the journey home, David and I took one last walk along the shoreline trail. The day was perfect, the sky a clear, infinite blue, the lake calm and welcoming. We walked in comfortable silence for a while, enjoying the simple pleasure of movement and natural beauty. "I've been thinking about what happens when we get back to Chicago," David said eventually, bending to pick up a particularly smooth stone from the beach. "How we maintain the changes we've started here." "It won't be easy," I acknowledged. "Patterns have a way of reasserting themselves in familiar environments." He nodded, skipping the stone across the water's surface where it bounced 4 times before sinking. "That's why I think we need concrete strategies, not just good intentions. Weekly check-ins about how we're doing with boundaries and communication. The therapy appointments I mentioned. Maybe a regular date night where we discuss actual meaningful things, not just scheduling and logistics." The thoughtfulness of his approach, the specificity of his suggestions, reinforced my belief that this transformation was genuine rather than temporary. The David who avoided difficult conversations, who chose the path of least resistance, had been replaced by a man willing to do the hard, consistent work of building an authentic relationship. "I'd add one more thing," I said, picking up my own stone to skip. "Regular time apart, pursuing our individual interests. One of our mistakes was trying to merge our lives too completely, sacrificing parts of ourselves in the process." David considered this, then nodded. "You're right. The best version of us together comes from being our full selves individually." We continued our walk, discussing practical aspects of our new beginning, how to handle the inevitable first. Turner family dinner back in Chicago, approaches for maintaining boundaries without creating unnecessary conflict, ways to nurture our reconnection while allowing space for individual growth. By the time we circled back to the resort, the family was gathered in the lobby, luggage being loaded into waiting cars for the journey home. Goodbyes were exchanged with surprising warmth, Jennifer's hug lingering, Michael's handshake firm and genuine, even Patricia's farewell containing a note of sincere appreciation. "You've created something beautiful here, Emma," she said as we stood on the resort's front steps. "Both in this place and in the opportunity for our family to see each other more clearly. I won't pretend the road ahead will be without its difficulties, but I am committed to trying." Coming from Patricia, this modest pledge represented a seismic shift. I accepted it with the gravity it deserved. "Thank you, Patricia. So am I." As the cars pulled away, David and I remained on the steps, watching until they disappeared down the winding drive. We would follow later that evening, after I completed a final meeting with Marcus about plans for the resort's autumn season. "Well," David said, turning to me with a smile that held equal parts wonder and determination, "that was quite a family vacation." I laughed, the sound free and genuine. "Not exactly what your mother had in mind when she planned it." "Thank God for that," he replied, pulling me close. "I think we've all had quite enough of what my mother had in mind." The remainder of the day passed in a blur of resort business and preparations for our own departure. I met with Marcus to discuss operational details for the coming months, including preliminary plans for the Christmas gathering Patricia had proposed. David spent the afternoon making calls related to his sabbatical, setting boundaries with the law firm and exploring opportunities in environmental advocacy. By late afternoon, we found ourselves drawn back to the private cove David had discovered earlier in the week. The secluded spot had become our sanctuary, a place untainted by family history or marital discord. We spread a blanket on the small beach, the late summer sun warming the sand around us. "I called my parents," I told David as we watched a sailboat tack across the distant horizon. "Told them about Christmas." He turned to me, eyebrows raised in question. "And?" "They were surprised, to put it mildly." I smiled at the memory of my mother's stunned silence, my father's awkward questions about required dress codes. "But they said yes. Dad's already researching the cross-country ski trails online." David laughed, the sound carrying across the water. "Your father in his flannel shirts and work boots among the cashmere-clad Turners. I can't wait to see it. He'll probably show up with his own hand-carved walking stick and outperform everyone on the trails," I predicted, remembering my father's quiet, unassuming competence in all outdoor activities. "I'm counting on it. Maybe he'll take my father along, get William Turner away from his phone for an entire afternoon." The easy way we could now joke about our families, acknowledging their quirks without defensiveness, felt like another small victory in our evolving relationship. As the sun began its descent toward the treetops, David reached for my hand, his expression growing more serious. "There's something I want to ask you." The tone of his voice made me turn to face him fully. "What is it?" He met my gaze directly, his eyes clear and determined. "When we get back to Chicago, would you consider renewing our vows? Not a big ceremony, just something simple. A fresh start, on more honest terms." The unexpected suggestion caught me by surprise. "Renew our vows?" He nodded, his fingers tightening around mine. "Our wedding was beautiful, but we were different people then. We made promises based on who we thought we were, who we thought we should be. I want to make new promises based on who we actually are, who we're choosing to become together." The thought was both moving and slightly terrifying, a public recommitment at a time when our relationship was still healing, still finding its new equilibrium. Yet there was something powerful in the idea of marking this transformation, of claiming our new understanding before we returned to the routines and pressures of everyday life. "Not right away," I said carefully. "Let's give ourselves time to live these changes first, to make sure they're real and lasting." David nodded, accepting the wisdom in my caution. 6 months? On our anniversary? The time frame felt right, long enough to test our new patterns, to ensure this wasn't just a vacation-induced epiphany that would fade once we returned to reality. "Our anniversary," I agreed. "And yes, something simple. Just us, making honest promises." The relief and joy that crossed his face warmed me from within. He leaned forward, kissing me with a tenderness that spoke of both gratitude for the past and hope for the future. When we finally pulled apart, the sun had dipped lower, casting long golden shadows across the small beach. "We should head back," I said reluctantly. "Marcus will be waiting to review those final documents before we leave." David nodded, helping me fold the blanket as we prepared to return to the resort. As we walked hand in hand along the shore, I found myself reflecting on the journey we had traveled in just 1 week, from betrayal and deception to this new, tentative honesty. The path ahead wouldn't be easy. Old patterns would reassert themselves. Patricia's acceptance would waver. William's attentiveness might fade. David's courage would be tested in countless small moments of choice between family peace and marital loyalty. My own tendency to withdraw, to protect myself behind walls of self-sufficiency, would need constant vigilance. But for the first time, in years, I felt genuinely hopeful about our future. Not because circumstances had magically aligned, but because we had both chosen to see clearly, to speak honestly, to stand in our truth even when uncomfortable. Whatever challenges awaited us in Chicago, we would face them differently now, stronger individually, more authentic together, and finally standing on solid ground of our own making. Our final dinner at Evergreen Shores was a private affair. Just David and me in the resort's smallest dining room overlooking the lake. The chef had prepared a special menu featuring local ingredients: white fish from the morning's catch, vegetables from nearby farms, wine from a Michigan vineyard I had supported since its founding. "To us," David said, raising his glass in a bar. Toast as we watched the sun set in a blaze of orange and gold over the water. "To truth and second chances." "To us," I echoed, clinking my glass against his. "And to owning our own stories." We ate slowly, savoring both the exceptional food and the quiet intimacy of the moment. No Turner family dynamics to navigate, no past hurts to address, just the simple pleasure of connection in the present moment. After dinner, we strolled along the moonlit dock, the resort's lights reflecting in the dark water below. In just a few hours, we would be driving back to Chicago, back to our regular lives now transformed by the truths we had faced at Evergreen Shores. "I want you to know something," David said as we paused at the end of the dock, the vast expanse of Lake Michigan stretching before us. "Whatever happens with my family, with my career, with all the changes ahead, you come first now. Not because you're my wife or because I should prioritize you, but because I choose to. Freely, fully, with complete awareness of what that means."